Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again tonight with another episode of After the Buzzer, the show where I recap the NBA games from the night. We just had the Christmas Day games, and it was pretty fun. There were a few duds here and there, and we're going to talk about every single one of them, but the last game of the night, Nuggets versus Suns, was an absolute classic, and so we're going to start with that one, work our way back, and I'm going to go through every single thing you might have missed, or at least just react to the things that you already saw on Christmas Day. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy, hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these videos, and let's go ahead and get right into it. Like I said, Nuggets versus Suns was easily the best game of the day, and to be honest, it wasn't very close, which is hilarious because technically, most of it didn't even take place here in the East Coast on Christmas. A lot of it, the fourth quarter and overtime, all took place after midnight, but we're gonna let it slide and let it count because it was that good. And it didn't seem like it was going to be because the Suns lost Devin Booker to re-injury very early on. He ended up straining his groin, kind of after hitting Michael Porter Jr. with a crazy move, and he would leave the game after only like 5 minutes, which was a shame because I bet on him to score more than 30, and he only scored about 2. So, you know, not a great Christmas gift to me, but the rest of the game was amazing, so I'll let it slide. And when this injury happened, Denver was already up double digits and showed no signs of slowing down, so it felt like this one might turn into a blowout, ending the day on a pretty sour note. But Phoenix kept close, mainly due to a few guys. Chris Paul finished the night with 17 points and 16 assists, and he was orchestrating the offense beautifully all throughout the game, while meanwhile Landry Shamet was going off, and this is now his second 30-piece because he scored 30 tonight in the past 3 games. For a guy that scores less than 9 points per game on the season, it's absolutely wild, and I think that's a great showcase of how good everybody in the NBA is when this guy that plays a little bit off of Phoenix's bench and scores 9 points per game can come in for a superstar player and score 30 in 2 out of his 3 appearances over the last 3 games. Damian Lee was also pretty nice in the early goings of this one. He slowed down a bit later because Landry Shamet completely took over and they didn't really need Damian Lee anymore, but he did kind of help them stay close in the first quarter and beginning of the second. Meanwhile, for Denver, Nikola Jokic was having one of the single greatest performances in Christmas Day history. I didn't fact check that necessarily, but just by looking at the stat line, you can probably tell that he's 100% up there with some of the GOATs on this day. He would finish with a stat line of 41 points, 15 rebounds, and 15 dimes in 44 minutes. That's the most points in a triple-double in the history of the Christmas Day games, which is kind of a cherry-pick stat, but it really showcases his greatness, and also it's my video, so I'm going to use it anyways. And watching this game, I just continue to feel the feeling that I always do when I watch Nikola Jokic, and that's the fact that I think he is the single funniest player I've ever watched. Imagine you're a 7-footer guarding Nikola Jokic. You play perfect defense possession after possession. You lock him up for most of the shot clock. He tries to back you down, and you give up a little bit of room, but plenty of space still to the basket, and so he can't just turn around and hook it over you. You've got him kind of right where you want him. And then Nikola Jokic turns around and hits this crazy slingshot shot that looks like the most awkward thing he's ever done, or he goes at you with the weirdest looking Euro step that looks like he's about to fall over because he's drunk, and he knocks it down with ease, and he does it again and again and again while dissecting your defense with the most absolutely absurd passes you have ever seen. Stuff that doesn't feel physically possible, like the ball has to be phasing through a player's hand or a leg or something, or it's teleporting. This is what Nikola Jokic does on basically every single night, and watching it in this game, it just continues to ring more true every time I watch him. It's unreal, and with this performance, he might have just moved into first place in the MVP conversation, although Jason Tatum, who's been my front runner for most of the season, also had a phenomenal game and a win over the Bucks that we'll talk about in a bit. But Nikola Jokic certainly made his case in this one, and I've already kind of been leaning towards him as maybe my MVP front runner, and now with this one, I don't know if it's 100% sure, but I'm kind of leaning that way for Jokic. Despite the Joker's heroics, this game came all the way down to the wire due to the great play of Chris Paul, Landry Shamet. DeAndre Ayton had a pretty good performance too. He was kind of getting cooked by Jokic on one end, but on the other side, he was knocking down some mid-range jumpers, making some hustle plays, getting some second chance opportunities, and all around having a pretty solid performance. And so things were really, really close. And at the end, we've got Landry Shamet and Chris Paul trading buckets with mainly Jamal Murray, who really heated up down the stretch. However, he would take a pretty bad shot with about 20 seconds left that nearly cost the Nuggets the game. Nikola Jokic got switched onto Mikal Bridges and had a pretty easy post up, but instead Jamal Murray took a fading mid-range jumper over the outstretched arm of DeAndre Ayton, and I will say he was on fire at that point, but you've still got to give it to Jokic in that situation or at least get a better look. However, after he missed that, he walked over to the broadcast crew on the sideline and told them, "I'm not missing the next one." He also told some fans in the crowd he was wired up for the game, so we were able to hear that, and DeAndre Ayton would split the free throws, keeping it a 2-point game, and Jamal Murray would come back down the other end, throw down a monster slam to tie things up, which would eventually send the game to overtime because, of course, we had to get more extra basketball in what was becoming a classic. OT was really fun with Shamet hitting a couple of threes, DeAndre Ayton doing his best job as well to keep Phoenix in the game. On the other side, Jokic, KCP, and Aaron Gordon in particular were having a really good performance of their own. And while we're on the topic of Aaron Gordon, I want to give him a couple shout-outs because first of all, he's having a career year. There are some people saying he should be in all-star considerations, and I don't think you'll really get much of that because the conference is just stacked and there's only 13 all-star spots. So I don't think he'll make the all-star game or anything, but he is one of the most impactful players on the #1 seed in the West. So I do believe he's been phenomenal this season. And also, he was having a dunk contest basically on his own in this one, throwing down like windmill dunks, backwards alley-oops. It was everything that we were hoping for from a high flyer like him, including what was absolutely the dunk of the year. Initially, they called this one a charge, and thank God they ended up overturning it because they had to see if he was in the restricted area or not. And according to a rule that the NBA changed recently, when they go ahead and review a charge to see if they were in the restricted area, if they see that the player was in a legal guarding position, they can also overturn that. So thank God this ended up being a good play, which if it wasn't, I would have been absolutely livid, as I'm sure the rest of NBA fans would have been. And Gordon finished this one with 28 points, as the Nuggets would end up taking this one in classic fashion. All around an amazing performance for them as they solidify their spot as the first seed in the Western Conference and continue to look the part of a true contender. For the rest of the games, we're going to run through them a lot quicker because it is really late here on the East Coast. I'm recording this at 2:35 a.m. and try and get the video uploaded tonight, so we're going to go ahead and speed this up a bit. But with Warriors versus Grizzlies, this is one that I thought Memphis was going to get a blowout win in because Golden State was without Steph Curry and without Andrew Wiggins, and that has not been a recipe for success this season or at all over the course of both of their tenures. However, Memphis just doesn't seem to know how to beat Golden State, and for some reason, regardless of who is on the Warriors roster, I truly believe they could take 5 random guys from NBA Twitter, put them out there on the court at home, and they would find a way to beat any contender because at home, they're like the greatest team of all time, while on the road, they can't win a game to save their lives, and they would blow out Memphis in this one. Jordan Poole had a 30-piece. Draymond Green had one of the most Draymond Green stat lines of all time with 3 points, 13 boards, and 13 dimes. Klay Thompson at 24, 9, and 4, and he also had the craziest taunt of Dylan Brooks that gave them their 6th technical of the game, 2 of which went to Jordan Poole, who did get ejected. And Golden State, they don't make any sense. I really don't understand. They don't feel like a contender, but I feel like I can't rule out Golden State, but they can't win on the road and then at home. Like I said, you could put anybody out there on the court for them and they would still find a way to get a win. It's just very, very confusing, but regardless, Golden State does get the big win at home on Christmas Day, so I guess shout out to them. And then for the Grizzlies, like I said, it feels like they just can't exercise these demons they have with Golden State. Ja Morant did have a phenomenal game. He had 36 points, 7 rebounds, and 8 assists as he debuted his first signature shoe, which a lot of people on NBA Twitter didn't like, but I think is pretty cool. So shout out to him for that big achievement. That's an awesome time in his NBA career. But outside of that, he didn't really get much help. Desmond Bane hasn't been great since returning from injury. He had just 9 points. Jaren Jackson Jr. continues to have foul trouble. When he's not fouling, he looks like one of the best defenders in the league, but there are a lot of times where he just can't seem to stop hitting people. And this was one of those nights, so he couldn't really stay on the court, which hurt their defense. He's got to figure that out for them to be a true contender. And all around, the Grizzlies just weren't able to beat Golden State tonight. I don't know if it's just a Warriors thing or if the Grizzlies have some problems, but regardless, this is one that they should have won. Bucks versus Celtics was probably my most anticipated game of the day. The 2 top teams in the Eastern Conference facing off, relatively healthy. Chris Middleton still not playing for the Milwaukee Bucks in this one. Robert Williams is also still kind of working his way back to full health for Boston, so it's the best we're gonna get at the moment, but it wasn't even close. I thought it was gonna be like a back and forth, down to the wire affair, watching like Giannis and Jason Tatum go head to head, which by the way, Tatum absolutely dunked on Giannis, which was incredible to see. He's now got both LeBron and Giannis on posters, which is a crazy duo to say that you've dunked on. And in the game, Jason Tatum had 41 points, 7 rebounds, and 5 dimes. Like I said, he continues to keep pace in the MVP conversation and might still be that front runner. Jaylen Brown had 29 points, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists. A bunch of other guys had double-digit performances, and this was just kind of a statement win for Boston, who put up 139 points, which I believe the broadcast said is a Christmas Day record. They've been kind of skidding as of late, but a big win over one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference at the moment could maybe set things straight for them going forward. Meanwhile, for the Bucks, they've been kind of struggling lately. Their offense in particular has looked really rough. I mean, their defense was bad too because they gave up almost 140 points, but offensively, that's been the big issue for them because Giannis himself hasn't looked as dominant as he typically does, and I will say Boston typically gives Giannis a lot of problems. They seem to just know how to scheme him. Al Horford has always been one of those guys that knows how to play Giannis a bit better than most, but even outside outside of this game where Giannis still had a good performance, he just wasn't the most efficient. Giannis hasn't quite looked as dominant, and I think part of that is their shooters aren't knocking down shots, so that's not really spacing the floor for him nearly as much. Chris Middleton hasn't been playing very often, and even when he is playing, he doesn't quite look like himself yet, so they don't have that true second option. Jrue Holiday is doing his best, but he's a bit too inconsistent, and he really needs to focus a bit more on playmaking for them to be highly successful. But with Chris out, they need him to score more because nobody else is going to do that. It's just a whole lot of things going on. I still think when Chris Middleton comes back, it'll fix a lot of these issues, but the Bucks have bigger problems than I think a lot of people are realizing. Fourth game we've got to talk about is Lakers versus Mavericks, which was a pretty fun one for most of it, although the Mavs would end up winning pretty comfortably by the end, and that's because they got basically their ideal game. Luka Doncic had 32 points. You had 30 from Christian Wood, 26 from Tim Hardaway, 14 from Reggie Bullock, and a couple other solid performances here and there. They scored 124 points and won pretty comfortably. That's what you want to see. If you can get Luka putting up around 30 points per game, a near triple-double, you've got a couple other guys in double digits, some solid performances here and there, guys are knocking down their threes, the Mavericks could be very, very successful. But these games don't come super often, and a lot of other times you get performances like they had against the Rockets the game before this, where Luka had 50 points, you got double digits from Dinwiddie and Bertans at 11, but nobody else did, and they barely squeaked out a win over the 9-23 Rockets. The variance for this team is way too high. They need more consistent options. They need that legit second guy, and Christian Wood, like I said, had a 30 piece in this one where he actually got the start, which is a rare sight for Christian Wood in Dallas, so maybe he can become a bit more involved as that second guy, but I still think they need a better second option for them to legitimately become a championship caliber team, because at the moment, I just think there's way too much variance for them to consistently win in playoff series. As for the Lakers, they're just not very good, especially without Anthony Davis. With this loss, they followed a 13-20 on the season. LeBron had a pretty good game with 38, 6, and 5. Austin Reeves had 16 points, Russ had 17, but they had nobody else in double figures. Dennis Schroeder and Patrick Beverley really both struggled offensively and defensively, and the whole team, to be honest, regardless of who you were, struggled out there defensively for the most part. The Mavericks were getting a ton of great look threes, mainly because Luka is a monster playmaker and has so much scoring gravity, but the Lakers were also late on rotations, they were lazy. It's just not good over there in LA. LeBron was publicly complaining about some of the lineups they had out there in post-game press conferences. It feels like things are on the verge of exploding, and if they don't make moves soon, this season is all but lost if it already isn't. Finally, for Sixers versus Knicks, Philly gets their 8th straight win, led by Joel Embiid and James Harden, who are starting to peak as a duo. Right now, we are seeing the best form of these two alongside each other, which is hilarious because before the game, Woj put out an article saying that James Harden is seriously considering maybe going back to Houston in this offseason. I don't really buy it because I think James Harden wants to try and compete for a championship before he gets too old, and Philly is easily his best chance at the moment. There's nowhere else that he's going to go where he can play with a big like Joel Embiid, an MVP caliber player, and he's got kind of this security with Daryl Morey, a GM that he's familiar with. So real quick, I don't really buy too much into those rumors. I think he's probably pretty happy in Philadelphia, especially when they have games like this where James Harden had 29 points and 14 dimes. He had 21 dimes the other night, and Joel Embiid had 35 points and 8 rebounds. They had 4 fourth quarter threes from Georges Niang, who helped them close this thing out. And overall, Philly's playing some amazing basketball, looking the part of a contender, and I think they're going to continue to move this way, especially with Tyrese Maxey's return on the horizon. And as for the New York Knicks, they started this one really, really hot, and it felt eerily similar to the game against the Thunder that they had a few weeks ago, where it was also like a noon game, and the Knicks started off super hot. They had almost 50 points in the first quarter. They couldn't miss. They were blistering from 3, and they slowly but very surely fell off over the course of the game to the point where they were kind of getting blown out at a few points. It was just unsustainable offense. Like, Julius Randle was knocking down the most contested threes you've ever seen, and he did end up having a pretty good game with 35 points, 8 rebounds, and 4 assists. Jalen Brunson had 23 and 11, but RJ Barrett, despite having a double-double, was pretty inefficient. Some of their other guys couldn't really score, and they just didn't have the personnel to stop Joel Embiid and James Harden, who picked them apart at every opportunity. We've seen this issue with the Knicks multiple times over the course of the season, a lot less over the course of their win streak, but they have to continue to get that consistent effort and that consistent play that they had over those 8 games that they won in a row if they want to continue to have success. With all that being said, I think Christmas Day 2022 was a pretty big success for the NBA. Like I said, the Nuggets-Suns game was an absolute classic. We got some huge moments with Jason Tatum dunking on Giannis. It was all around a really fun day of hoops, and I just want to thank you all again for all the support you've shown the channel this year, and I hope you had a Merry Christmas if you celebrate, and if you don't, I hope you have a happy holiday season. I appreciate y'all watching. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these videos, and rate Christmas Day 2022 in the NBA on a scale of 1 to 10 below. Appreciate y'all watching. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.